being really immature. You have no reason to be mad at me. I mean, you broke my heart. I should be royally ticked off at you. I should be really cheesed off. I shouldn't want to talk to you anymore.
The alarm clock on May's nightstand rang loudly like it did every Monday morning. With a groan, she had rolled over and turned it off. She pushed her comforter off her and dragged herself out of bed and into the kitchen. Something felt off, and with a yawn she realized it was because Peter wasn't up yet, which was unusual for him because he was always up before her. She sighed and ran a hand through her long hair before turning around on her heel and back down the hallway towards Peter's room. She knew he'd probably want to stay home, but she also knew he had missed too many days of school already, and any more would result in him not being able to graduate. She quietly pushed open his bedroom door and stepped in. Peter looked awful as he laid in bed sleeping, and May knew he probably just fell asleep around an hour ago. It killed her to have to make him go to school when he was in such bad shape, but other than the fact that he wouldn't be allowed to graduate, staying in this environment was dangerous for him. For the last 2 days, Peter had been an absolute wreck. He barely got any sleep. He hasn't showered, and if it wasn't for May, he wouldn't have been eating either. After she had come back Saturday night from her friend's place upstate, she had found Peter on the couch in tears while Harry Potter played on the TV in front of him. He was wearing the same hoodie from the night before with the same pink blanket, only now, he was sitting in a pile of a bunch of your other belongings too, and May realized he must have searched his room for anything that was yours. There were tissues scattered everywhere, and a bunch of Polaroid pictures he took of you were on the coffee table. And when she went over to the sink, she realized that he hadn't had anything to eat by the lack of dishes. The weather had reflected his mood as it poured the entire day and night. After she forced him to eat a sandwich, and she helped clean up the mess he made in the living room, she didn't know how long he had stayed up that night, but she was woken up throughout the night by his sobs. And on Sunday, he had stayed holed up in his bedroom in and out of sleep. When he was up, he was either looking through videos or pictures of you while he blasted yours and his song on repeat for the entire day, which drove May crazy. May frowned, looking down at her nephew's sleeping face. He was still in your hoodie and still wrapped up in your blanket. His eyes had dark bags under them and were still swollen. His hair was a mess as it stood up in a dozen different directions, and May was going to have to talk him into taking a shower. She bit her lip and gently shook his shoulder. "Peter?" she said softly, and he groaned, blinking his eyes open. "Peter, come on, you have school." Peter's eyes shot wide open, now completely awake. He had been planning on staying in all day and skipping school, and he thought May had figured it out. "What? No, I can't. I want to stay home." "Peter," she said firmly, "you already know you can't miss any more days of school. Then I won't graduate. Please, I just want to stay home." May ran a hand through her hair again. "Please, Peter, I want you to get out for a bit. You've been inside for 3 days now." "But she's gonna be there," he whined. "Guess what, honey? She's gonna be there for the rest of the school year. You can't stay inside all that time either. Now get up and take a shower. You don't want to be late," she said, yanking the blanket off him and swiftly leaving the room so she could get ready for the day herself. Peter groaned, pressing the palms of his hands against his eyes. Just the thought of having to see you today was making his heart pound against his ribs, but reluctantly, he pulled himself out of bed, took a half-assed shower, which consisted of him crying while he sat under the shower head. After he got dressed, not nearly putting in as much effort as usual, he just put on a random t-shirt and a pair of jeans, leaving his hair wet. He skipped breakfast, slipped on his shoes, and pulled on his backpack. The entire morning already feeling so surreal as he got ready with slow movements, not even a little prepared to face the day.
Yeah, but you just take soupy sales to prom. I can think of so many cooler things to do that night. Like, you know what, like, I might pumice my feet, might go to Bransdom Unitarian Church, maybe get hit by a truck full of hot garbage juice, you know, because all those things would be exponentially cooler than going to prom with you.
You yawned tiredly as you pulled open your locker. You had stayed up late texting Brad, and now you were ready to pass out. After he asked you out on Friday, you explained to him that you wanted to take things slow, so as a first date, you both decided to just hang out at your place on Saturday. It was familiar, but also kind of new, since the two of you knew that you were both hanging out as a little bit more than friends. But to put it in simpler terms, you were dating Brad, but you were going to go slow. Your phone vibrated, and quickly checking the message, you saw it was from Brad. "Good morning." You felt your heart flutter. You always appreciated those kinds of simple gestures. You quickly sent him one back before shoving your phone into your pocket and reaching inside your locker for your history book. You paid no mind when you suddenly felt Peter's presence beside you. You'd gotten pretty used to ignoring it these past few weeks, but what you didn't notice, however, was the way Peter kept glancing at you as he put in his combination, and when you finally looked his way, he swung his locker open, quickly hiding behind the door. But before he completely disappeared behind it, you caught a glance of his face, and to put it the way MJ would have, he looked like shit, and you started wondering if Spider-Man had found himself in some trouble last night. You also found it really strange that his hair was still damp, because if there was one thing you learned about Peter Parker after all these years, it was that he always styled his hair in the morning with what some might consider too much hair gel. You rolled your eyes. Whatever, it's not my problem, you thought to yourself as you continued pulling out the rest of your books you needed for your morning classes. Meanwhile, Peter on the other hand was absolutely terrified. He was tensed and he practically forgot how to breathe. On the walk to school, he had thought back on his aunt's advice on making it right, and he debated the entire time with himself if he should try. On one hand, he wasn't even sure if he could even see you without crying at this point, and he knew you hated him, and he really didn't want to experience what it was like to be on the receiving end of that any more than he already was. But on the other hand, nothing was ever going to happen if he just kept his mouth shut. But now in the moment, he was feeling emotional, impulsive, and he just really wanted to trust his aunt on the matter. He could just barely see you through the slits on his locker door and found himself frozen, thinking over and over what he could possibly say in this moment to try and at least get the two of you back on speaking terms. His mouth fell open, and he muttered quietly, "Yasmin?" Your name felt foreign on his tongue, and he hated it. You raised an eyebrow, feeling very confused. Yeah? Peter's mind went blank at hearing your voice, and he had no idea what to say. You sighed in annoyance. Are you gonna talk to me behind your locker the whole time? Right. His voice sounded small, and you were really beginning to wonder what was wrong with him, but he pushed the locker door out of the way, and you were both finally face to face. Your eyes widened slightly at his appearance, and to correct your thought from earlier, he looked worse than shit, but you made no comment as you waited for him to speak. He mumbled, not being able to look you in the eye, his face already a bright red. I was wondering if you'd, come back and sit with us at lunch? He sounded so small and it made you feel uneasy. His attitude had done an entire 180 from the last you spoke to him. You bit your lip, thrown off by the offer. It was nice, but with you and Brad now, you weren't really inclined to take up his offer. I don't know. I was planning on sitting with Brad. Peter seemed to crumble even further, and you were wondering why he even showed up to school today. Oh, he said softly, and he panicked. It's just, Ned misses you, he said in an attempt to cover himself. You gave a curt nod. Right. You turned back to your locker and shut the door. Hey, you suddenly whipped around, finding Brad behind you with a large smile, which you quickly mirrored, making Peter frown. He glanced at Peter and quickly raised his eyebrow in slight confusion. He had seen the strange interaction between the two of you as he walked down the hall. He looked back at you. You ready? Yeah. You glanced at Peter for a second before looking at Brad again. Let's go. And with that, the two of you started making your way to your shared history class. Peter watched as the two of you walked past him down the hallway before shutting his locker and leaning his forehead against it. He felt intense jealousy bubble in his stomach as he blinked back tears. Oh my god. Someone, MJ, hissed as he walked up next to him. What the hell happened to you? I made a mistake. MJ felt a sense of dread wash over her. Oh, don't fucking tell me. Peter stayed silent as she put the pieces together. She scoffed. Typical. When you have her, you don't want her around. But now, when she's with someone else and actually happy, now you want her? She said with a roll of her eyes. I love her, he practically whimpered. She scoffed again. Funny, I distinctly remember you going on a rant about how much you didn't love her. Peter finally pushed himself off his locker and faced MJ. Please don't remind me, he begged. I know what I said, and I take it back. She shook her head. Whatever. I saw you two talking. What did you say? I invited her to sit with us at lunch again. And? She said she was sitting with Brad, he said, biting his lip. The warning bell rang, making MJ sigh. We'll talk about this in lunch. Right now, I have to go to history and you have to go to math, so see you later, dumbass, she said before stalking past him in the same direction you and Brad just went. Peter trudged to his math class, feeling the tiniest bit of gratefulness upon seeing that his teacher was out for the day. Without wasting any time, Peter sat way in the back of the classroom by himself. Not his usual seat, but it wasn't like the sub cared. For the most part, the class was quiet, seeing as it was the first period on a Monday morning and everyone was already exhausted. Some of his classmates worked on the worksheets that were left out for them, but the rest did their own things, either finishing up homework for another class or talking about the latest drama in school. And Peter realized that unfortunately, the news about you and Brad spread like wildfire. Oh my god. Lindsay, one of the popular girls in his grade, whined. Did you hear about Yasmin and Brad? She asked her friends with a pout. Peter perked up at that. He had currently been sitting with his head on his arms, staring at the clock for the last 20 minutes when he overheard the conversation. Oh yeah, her friend Megan exclaimed. It was all over Brad's Snapchat. Wait, her other friend Elizabeth started. What was? I haven't heard. Well, Lindsay said, pushing her long, dirty blonde hair behind her shoulder. Apparently, Brad and Yasmin are dating now. No, Elizabeth hissed. Since when? Lindsay shrugged. I don't know, but I'm pretty pissed. I've been flirting with him for the last few weeks and then this slut comes out of nowhere and suddenly Brad is heads over heels. Peter's nails dig into the palm of his hands painfully when she called you a slut, but he continued to listen on. Oh, that blows, Megan added. I thought Yasmin was dating someone though. Patrick, I think? Peter rolled his eyes. He had been sharing classes with Megan for the last 3 years and she still had no idea who he was. Wait, what happened? A new voice interjected from the other side of the classroom, and an immediate sense of dread upon realizing that the person who had just asked the question was Flash. Peter watched in horror as the girl spoke to Flash across the classroom, so now everyone was clued in on the new drama. Yasmin's dating Brad, Elizabeth called out, her voice obnoxious and way too loud. Flash furrowed his eyebrows, a smile beginning to grow. Yasmin? As in, Peter's Yasmin? However, their voices fade into the background as time seemed to slow down as Flash's eyes danced across the entire room before landing on Peter. There was a glint in his eyes and a shit-eating smile on his face. Yo! He called to Peter in the back. Parker, did you know your girlfriend's dating Brad? Peter shrunk in his seat. The entire class's attention was on him now. Flash seemed to be pleased with Peter's reaction, seeing how his grin widened. What, you don't want to talk about it? He laughed. Leave me alone, Flash. Peter's voice wavered. Oh, is Penis Parker gonna cry? He mocked with another laugh, finally getting out of his seat and heading towards Peter, the whole class watching the interaction. I mean, it was about time she left you. And to leave you for someone like Brad, he whistled lowly. You didn't actually think she was gonna stay with you forever, did you? Peter buried his face into his arms, trying to ignore everyone's amused faces while also trying not to cry. Flash laughed again. You think she's gonna fall for Brad? If she fell for you, I'm sure she'll fall for him in no time. Hold on, Elizabeth chirped. Yasmin broke up with him for Brad? She asked, confusion written all over her face. I thought they broke up ages ago. Peter looked up and furrowed his eyebrows at that, and Flash picked up on his confusion. What? You didn't know? What? He asked. Practically the whole school thought you two broke up months ago, he scoffed. I really thought it was about time she dumped your ass. Peter felt awful at the thought of the whole school picking up on his failing relationship before he did. Flash suddenly gasped as a thought struck him. Do you think they fucked? Peter immediately tensed and looked up at Flash's taunting smirk, knowing he struck a chord with Peter. I'm sure you thought about it at least. About Brad having his hands all over your girl. Hey, where are you going? Peter grabbed his bag standing out of his seat and he practically ran out of the classroom, ignoring his classmates' laughter and the calls from the sub to come back. He let his tears roll freely down his cheeks as he ran to the boys' bathroom and suddenly felt like he was back in middle school when he used to hide in the boys' bathroom and cry after he'd been bullied. You always used to follow him, even though it was the boys' bathroom, and you would hold him while he cried. But you obviously weren't there to comfort him now. He had hid in one of the bathroom stalls until the end of first period, and once the bell for his second class rang, he reluctantly left and went back to class, ignoring all the stares in the hallway from his classmates that shared his first period with him. He moved like a zombie throughout his next 3 periods. He was exhausted and distracted, and there was an occasional sharp pain in his heart when you popped up in his mind over and over again. He had to ignore the obvious snickers in each class that was directed his way, and he put together that the events from this morning had gone around, and he could only hope that the embarrassing news hadn't reached your ears yet. Peter felt a slight sense of relief when the bell for lunch rang. Hey, did you hear what happened first period? You and Brad jumped as Jake, Brad's best friend, sat himself in the seat across from you at your lunch table. You quirked an eyebrow at him. No. What happened? Not too long ago, you had started to sit at Brad's old lunch table, and you supposed that his friends were now slowly becoming your friends. And Jake was definitely the most hyper of the bunch. Well, Miss Yasmin, it looks like your ex, he pointed his finger behind you towards Peter's table, apparently isn't over you anymore. You glanced at Brad's confused face, mirroring your own. What makes you say that? Brad asked uneasily. Because during math today, everyone was talking about you and Yasmin dating now, and Peter's in that class, so as usual, Flash took it as his opportunity to torment him, and he ran out of class crying. You rolled your eyes. Doesn't mean he's not over me. Just that Flash is a dick that knows how to push the right buttons. Jake raised an eyebrow at you. Then why is he crying right now? You furrowed your eyebrows and turned around to look back at your old lunch table, Brad doing the same. And just like Jake said, Peter was in tears, crying the way someone should only do in private. You felt a tug on your heart, and that worried you. You were finally moving on. You didn't need him making you feel bad for him, especially after everything he's put you through. You turned back around. Whatever, he deserves it, you muttered, looking down at the table. Hey, Brad said, placing a hand on your shoulder. Maybe we can go out for lunch instead. Get away from the drama. You nodded. Yeah, let's go. The two of you stood up out of your seats. Wait! Jake stopped the two of you. What are you gonna do about Loverboy back there? You shrugged. There's nothing to do. And don't you think it's kinda weird that he's completely fine after the breakup and all of a sudden now he's upset? Jake pursed his lips in thought. Maybe he feels bad now after hearing about you and Brad. He narrowed his eyes further and thought, maybe he realized he's still in love with you. Okay! Brad suddenly cut him off. Enough of that, let's go. He quickly grabbed your hand and the two of you left to eat out for lunch, and you avoided Peter's gaze as you and Brad headed out hand in hand. When Peter had first arrived in the cafeteria, he didn't have much of an appetite, so he didn't grab any lunch, and instead, once again, buried his head into his arms on the table. Not long after did he feel Ned sit down across from him. Hey man, Ned greeted nervously. Are you okay? You haven't returned any of my texts. Peter looked up, resting his chin on his arms now, Ned's eyes widening at his appearance. Not okay, he groaned. What happened? Ned asked with furrowed eyebrows. You just ran out on Friday without telling me anything. Yes, he mumbled again. Ned's face softened, picking up on how he used your nickname, something he hadn't done in a while. You miss her now, Ned said, putting the pieces together. The two of them jumped when MJ plopped herself down next to Ned, and for the first time in weeks, Peter was aware of how empty the seat next to him was. Alright, she started. I don't normally care about people's emotions and blah blah blah, but since this has to do with my best friend, I want you to tell me everything. So what the fuck happened? Peter choked out, thrown off by MJ's aggressiveness. MJ, Ned said softly. Maybe you should go easy on him. She bit her lip and sighed. Fine. Just what happened between Friday and now that you love her all of a sudden? She said in the gentlest voice she could muster. Peter sat up and sighed, staring down at the lunch table. Brad asked her out and she said yes, he almost whispered. And I saw her kiss him. She raised an eyebrow. And what? You have it in your head that she's still yours? She's not allowed to be happy with anyone else? No, Peter whined out. I realized I'm still in love with her. Why did you push her away then? Ned asked. Peter felt on the verge of tears again with that question. I don't know. I messed up. I shouldn't have ignored her. I thought back on it and she really was miserable. I wish I could take it all back. I just love her so much. MJ scoffed. Well, it's a shitty time to realize that. Trust me. I know. MJ shook her head in disbelief at the entire situation. God, I'm so disappointed, she said, her voice becoming more genuine and gentle. I really wished you realized sooner. She loved you so much. I can't even begin to tell you how many times she's called me in tears about you. Really? MJ nodded, and Peter felt a few tears run down his cheeks, and he quickly wiped them away. I heard Brad posted about her on Snapchat? Ned frowned. Oh, yeah. Do you have him on Snapchat? Peter asked. Yeah, but I don't think it's such a good idea to look at them. Ned trailed off. I don't care. Give me your phone, Peter said, making Ned pull out his phone and open up the app before handing it to him. Peter tapped quickly on Brad's Snapchat. He tapped through the videos and pictures of you, and all of them you were smiling brightly and laughing. Peter felt 10 times worse now. One particular video that hit home with him was a video of you with a pile of your comics, most of which Peter had given you, in front of you, and you were in the middle of one of your rants and the caption read, Nerd. Ned watched with wide eyes as Peter crumbled into a sobbing mess, shoulders shaking and tears rolling down his cheeks. Ned took a glance around, seeing how Peter was drawing attention. Peter, you're kind of making a scene. Peter dropped the phone onto the table. I don't care, he cried. I just want my Yaz back, MJ scoffed. Why? So you can treat her like shit again? She said, making Peter cry louder now. MJ! Ned hissed. She shrugged. I'm sorry, but you know I'm right. She looked at Peter. I know I don't say it often, but I do care about you. But I also care about Yasmin. And I'm sorry, but it's really hard to sympathize with you after what you did to her. Quite frankly, I think you deserve this. I know I do. I hurt her. He buried his face back into his arms, and Ned and MJ watched as his shoulders shook with each sob. MJ sighed impatiently, glancing around the cafeteria, seeing as people were shamelessly staring now. Alright, stop crying. People are staring and you're an ugly crier, she mumbled. Maybe you just have to look on the bright side? Ned offered. There is no bright side. Peter groaned into his arms. She was it! He lifted his head up again, which proved to be a mistake because just then he saw you and Brad holding hands as you both left the cafeteria, and he could feel the jealousy rise in the back of his throat. Now I'm curious. MJ started pulling Peter from his thoughts. What's the bright side? She asked Ned. Well, I was thinking the bright side might be that she isn't over Peter. Wait, what? When did she say that? Peter asked. A couple days ago, before Brad asked her out. Wait, does that... Peter's eyebrows furrowed as the tiniest bit of hope trickled into his veins. Does that mean I can fix it? He asked Ned hopefully. I mean, maybe? No, MJ cut off Ned sharply. Absolutely not. But if she still likes me, maybe I would screw everything even more if you tried to fix it now. MJ rolled her eyes. She's trying to move on, and she just started dating Brad. You can't fix it, Peter. He frowned. Peter couldn't see MJ's reasoning. If you just started going out with Brad, but you still weren't over him, then he could make up with you before anything more serious happens between you and Brad. He could fix everything, tell you how sorry he was, and treat you the way he should have been treating you all along. He could go back to marathoning your favorite TV shows and movies and listening to your adorable, passionate rants. And you could go back to helping him build Legos and modeling for his pictures. No, I can fix it, he muttered, fully convinced. I'm gonna talk to her. Peter, MJ said in a warning tone. Don't be stupid. I have to, Peter said with slight urgency in his tone as he looked at MJ. She's my girlfriend. No, she isn't, she snapped. If she was, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You need to try and move on too, and maybe once the two of you are over this breakup, we can all go back to being friends and live happily ever after or whatever. But trust me, trying to make up with her now is only going to make things worse. Peter fell silent. No, he thought to himself. She's wrong. But he kept his mouth shut and just nodded. He knew he wasn't ready to move on. He didn't want to. And as long as you still liked him, he still had a chance. He had to win you back. After lunch, you were a bit distracted for the rest of the day. You couldn't get Peter's tear-stained face out of your head, and it was beginning to drive you insane. You were supposed to be done with him and his drama. You were done. You had Brad now, a guy who's been nothing but kind and sweet to you. A guy who's been there to help you throughout your entire breakup, and you'd be damned if you screwed up something so nice just because you were worried about your ex. And by the time your last class of the day, which also happened to be the only class you shared with Peter, rolled around, you couldn't help but feel his lingering gaze on you the entire time, and you were about ready to rip your hair out. You kept your head turned away from him, pretending to diligently take notes for the entire period, until Mr. Harrington had pulled off the PowerPoint. Okay, so we'll be starting a lab tomorrow? so I need you to pair up with your lab partners and complete the prediction worksheet. Your heart plummeted. You almost forgot since Mr. Harrington didn't do too many labs in class, but of course your lab partner was Peter. You closed your eyes and sighed. This day is never gonna end, is it? Reluctantly, you pulled yourself out of your seat, following the other students' actions as they moved around the classroom to sit with their lab partners. So silently, you moved to sit with Peter, who was already sitting at the lab table with his eyes glued on you. Hi, he stuttered, which you returned with a curt nod, settling down in your seat as Mr. Harrington handed out the worksheets, giving you an awkward smile and a thumbs up as he handed you your worksheets, and he nodded in Peter's direction. You returned his awkward smile with a tight-lipped one. Peter picked up on the fact you didn't want to talk to him, so he looked down at his worksheet, slowly beginning to answer some questions. However, his eyes kept trailing off, landing on you and observing you like it was the first time he ever saw you. He saw how your tongue poked through your lip like it always did when you were concentrating, and he just wanted to push back the strands of hair that fell on your face, but he couldn't do that anymore. He couldn't believe, as he admired you, how he was actually able to ignore you for so long. You were absolutely gorgeous, which was something he's always thought, but he's never been able to fully grasp, and it killed him to think how sad you've been lately. To think about your beautiful face screwed up in tears made him so angry with himself, but he could fix it. How was your day? He suddenly blurted out, the words rushed. You slowly looked up at him with furrowed eyebrows. What? You asked slowly. Peter choked up now. How was your day? He asked again, unsure of himself. What the fuck is he on? You thought to yourself. Rage and annoyance bubbled in the pit of your stomach. Why the fuck should he care now? I thought I told you not to talk to me anymore. Your words laced with annoyance. Was it mean? Yes, but you weren't in the mood to care about how he felt. Sorry, he practically squeaked, making you roll your eyes and turn back to your paper. It stayed silent for about 5 minutes before your annoyance kept increasing as he still kept looking up at you. You slammed your pencil down, making Peter jump and snap his head up at you. Alright, what's your deal, Parker? Why are you acting so weird? His mouth fell open and shut a couple times. He trailed off. You raised an eyebrow. You what? Is there an end to that sentence? You hated to admit it, but it finally felt nice to have the upper hand for once. He shrank in his seat. I wanted to ask. I know you don't want me to talk to you, but I was just wondering if we could talk after class. His eyes were trained on the lab table, not being able to make eye contact with you. About what? You asked skeptically. About us, he muttered under his breath. What? You asked, not being able to hear him. About us, he said, slightly louder. You faltered. I really don't think that's a good idea. Please, it won't take long. Please. He sounded desperate. It was kind of ironic that he was the one begging to speak to you now, and as much as you had wished that you could say no, you were still weak for him. Fine, you agreed coldly. But it better be quick. His breath hitched. Thank you. You rolled your eyes. Yeah, whatever, you said, cutting him off before the two of you finished the worksheet as you waited for the bell to ring. Admittedly, you were pretty nervous as you waited. You weren't sure what he wanted to talk about, but if it had to do with the two of you, you knew it couldn't be good. Once the bell had finally rang, you ignored your pounding heart and asked, Where did you want to talk? The prop room? He asked, unsure of himself. He wasn't very sure if it was a smart idea or not. The prop room had kind of been your secret place. The two of you used to skip class sometimes to hang out in the prop room to either talk or make out, so he definitely never thought the two of you would go in there to discuss your breakup. Fine, you agreed, pulling out your phone to text Brad that you'd be a few minutes late to your locker. You'd tell him what you were doing later. The two of you made your way out of the classroom, Peter following behind you, feeling like he was about to pass out even though he had been rehearsing what he was going to say since lunch. As soon as you made it to the prop room and you were both inside, you spun around to face him, arms crossed. Speak, you said impatiently. Peter felt put on the spot. I guess I want to start by saying I'm sorry. He once again avoided your gaze. You quirked an eyebrow. For? Everything, he breathed out. I'm sorry for ignoring you. I'm sorry for standing you up, not answering the phone. I'm sorry for accusing you of cheating. I'm sorry for how we left things. Stop. You cut him off. You couldn't do this. You couldn't listen to him apologize for everything now. Not when you just started to really move on. Not when you just started to date Brad. What is it that you want, Peter? You did a good job of keeping your voice under control, which you were really proud of. What I want? He asked, surprised that you cut off his apology. I guess I was kind of hoping that maybe if I apologized and told you how bad I miss you and that I could change, that I have changed, maybe you'd want to get back together? He asked softly, voice fragile. You could hear a pin drop in the room. You were shocked and appalled, to say the least. You scoffed. You're fucking with me. You laughed coldly. How fucking dare you, Parker? Peter stared at you wide-eyed, not knowing what to say. 4 months, Parker. 4 months of me having to deal and put up with your shit, and now, when I'm finally happy for once, is when you decide to have the brains to finally realize that our amazing relationship went to shit? Is it because I'm with Brad now? Because if that's the reason, fuck you. I don't have to deal with your jealousy because guess what? I have a perfectly great guy that actually cares for me waiting by my locker right now, and when I go to see him in a few minutes, I'm gonna have to tell him I was with my stupid fucking ex that somehow got it in his head that I just drop everything to be with him. Stop feeling so entitled. You pushed me away when you didn't want me around. I won't let you have me when you finally start to miss me, you panted. I stand by what I said. Don't talk to me anymore. And with that, you left the prop room, leaving Peter by himself. Peter was frozen in his spot, completely overwhelmed. He couldn't believe he really fucked up that badly. And once again, he spent the 4th night since he found out about you and Brad crying.